Hey, everybody, and good evening to you. Happy Tuesday. I'm Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson for my radar. It is about 6:45 roughly. This will serve as our evening update on Hurricane Dorian, now making some move. I am so happy to tell you that this hurricane has finally pulled away from the Bahamas, where rescue efforts have started and crews will continue to pour into the northwestern Bahamas in the coming days and weeks and months to help those folks that have sustained catastrophic damage. I don't know if you've seen some of the video or pictures. We have them on our social media pages. They are absolutely stunningly sad, and it's just unbelievable, the level of destruction. Very similar to what we saw with Hurricane Andrew and Hurricane Michael just last year. So thankfully, Dorian is pulled away from the Bahamas, and it has continued to follow its track, and that's all good. We still continue to deal with some pretty nasty weather, though, in the state of Florida tonight. So our own Aaron Jajak, who is chasing Dorian's every move, is over in Brevard County, and he is in the thick of it. And here's his latest.
I am in Melbourne, Florida, where the first outer bands of Hurricane Dorian are now making shore here on the beach. This is the first out as the edge of the storm is expanding. It's now coming ashore here, approaching shore, just offshore here. This is definitely the strongest winds I've felt yet. We've got my decimal meter here, taking winds like this. We're getting gusts up to about 25, 30 knots. Sustained right now at 25 knots. Gusting up over 30 knots right now. The conditions should continue to deteriorate through the afternoon as Hurricane Dorian slowly gets closer to the Florida coast here. Likely getting the closest near the Space Coast just to the north of here. I'll be chasing the storm here through the evening, afternoon, through the evening, and into tomorrow likely. Maybe up into the Carolinas. Chasing from my radar is the storm chaser Aaron Jajak.
All right, you guys, so you can see it's getting pretty intense over there with Aaron. And of course, this is the bulk of the bad weather for the state of Florida tonight and tomorrow. So if you live in Florida and you're in the interior part of the state or over east side, of course, where it's much worse, this will be the worst that you're getting, especially central and north Florida. South Florida, the weather is going to start to dramatically improve there. Folks that live on the west side of the state, you could get some of the squalls in the outer bands, especially in the Tampa Bay area, even down maybe into Naples area as well. And the southwest side, you might get some of the outer rain bands, but generally this is going to be the interior and especially the coastal areas of the state of Florida. So we have some other video I want to show you as well. This was in Neptune Beach, an angry wind and afternoon there with the storms ripping through. Of course, folks have boarded up and got out of Dodge, and everybody under a mandatory evacuation, and hopefully everybody has heeded those evacuations, because I think the curfew starts tonight as well. We also have some video over at the beaches where Aaron shot, where some of the turtle eggs unfortunately are being turned up from all of the onshore flow and the really rough surf conditions. Aaron wasn't sure if we looked at these eggs if they had actually hatched or not, and you're not supposed to touch them. I hope that they were able to get out and get into the ocean before Dorian's fury got to Florida. But I know that I've seen on social media a lot of people showing eggs that didn't hatch, that have been turned up. It's such a sad scenario, but it's Mother Nature and it's how it works, unfortunately, sometimes. All right, let's go back to our infrared imagery, and what a difference 24 hours can make, you guys. It has been such a stark contrast from what we were dealing with yesterday to tonight. Now, this is still a top in category 2. The winds are 110 miles an hour, but in terms of that ferocious hurricane and catastrophic historic hurricane that moved over the Bahamas, we are not dealing with that now. However, we are dealing with a hurricane that's expanded in width and length, and that it does mean that it's going to impact more geography than originally thought, however, at a weaker level. So this is not a category 4, category 5 hurricane, which we were initially concerned with. This is a top end category 2, and that still has winds as a dangerous 110 miles an hour. We couldn't see the eye most of the day today, today, but now we're starting to see it reemerge. A little bit of that blue there is down to the Atlantic Ocean. I'm going to wait till it loops one more time and show you how elongated this is. About 74 miles across, you guys. At the core, at the peak of its intensity, the actual vortex, the eye itself was about 12 miles across. So it has really expanded, become elongated. That is a sign of a weakening, less organized hurricane. And let me show you our 3D hurricane model that I've been showing all week. It's a fantastic tool to kind of look at the inner cores of this hurricane. So this is from the GO-16. It's a visible imagery, high resolution scan that scans every 15 minutes. And as you can, if you've been watching our coverage, you know that just yesterday, the eye was very evident. There was a big black red spike on the northeastern quadrant where those category 4 winds are. You can still kind of see that redness there that kind of is the deepest center. That is where the center of circulation is, but nowhere near what we saw just 24 hours ago. And of course, that's a good thing. So in terms of watches and warnings, those did change today as well. Because now Dorian finally moving, we've seen some uptick in the watches and warnings across the U.S. Across the state of Florida, the hurricane warning is up for Brevard County down into Indian River County as well. Tropical storm warnings are in for interior parts of Florida that you see shaded in orange, and there's a big green there for flood watch, but there's also an inland tropical storm warning there as well. And then broadening the picture out, the hurricane watches now extend all the way up to the North Carolina-Virginia border, where Thursday and Friday will be the critical days for those areas, and then down into parts of South Carolina under a hurricane warning, and then we've got tropical storm warnings for the areas shaded in purple. The yellow, Lake Okeechobee, still under tropical storm watch because Lake Okeechobee, it's so big, it cannot actually have its own weather. They have water spouts, and there's a water level rise when there's an approaching hurricane because of the onshore flow. So they might have some minor flooding down there. I haven't checked lately. As of 6 o'clock, the winds were 110 miles an hour, northwest at 6. All good things in terms of weakening and a faster moving hurricane. Get it out of here as quickly as we can. Is what we want. The pressure 958. Hurricane Center still thinks that it's going to be closest to Florida through tomorrow. So if you are in Florida, the worst weather for you is tonight and tomorrow. And then by tomorrow, by 5 or 6 o'clock, most of the bad weather leaves Florida and heads to Georgia and the Carolinas after that. So you'll see markedly improving weather by Thursday for Florida. And then, of course, we're concerned with South Carolina and North Carolina. But then the intensity or the movement of Dorian is expected to get even quicker and become possibly extratropical as it moves up into Nova Scotia by Sunday. So the United States should be done with Dorian by Friday at the latest, but definitely going to have several days here where we've got some really critical weather we got to watch. I wanted to show you the last 24 hours of the satellite and radar because this is a good presentation. Look at that eye. Focus on the eye. See how ragged it is and how much larger it's getting. The upwelling in the Atlantic Ocean and lack of steering currents and the fact that this hurricane's been dealing with land for so long is helping to disrupt that core. So one of the reasons why we see some of these incredibly powerful hurricanes come in through the channel there that's near the Windward Islands in the Caribbean is because there's no land around it. And then once these hurricanes start to interact with land, or it's open water. Remember, Dorian had open water for days before it hit the Bahamas. So it had every opportunity to grow and rapidly intensify, and it did. And you can see that elongated eye there as it continues to rotate about, let's see quickly how far that is offshore. I've got a closer vantage point, but roughly we're looking at about 115 miles off the coast of Sebastian and the Sebastian Inlet. So it's fairly east of Florida, but because that wind field has expanded, we're going to continue to be dealing with tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds along the immediate coastline of Florida. Storm surge warning is the areas you see shaded in pink there, and then those were extended up into the Carolinas as well into a watch. So that surge of 4 to 7 feet, still a real viable problem for parts of Florida. It increases. The threat is increasing for Georgia and South Carolina tonight and tomorrow and into Thursday. It'll be North Carolina, maybe Virginia, that storm surge as well. And as we look at the product, I've got the storm surge inundation, which kind of lays out the level of rain that that storm surge you could get. I'll kind of go quickly here as we zoom up. Well, it did it for me. So let me go up and start up here. and will go down the coast. So Georgetown, anywhere from 3 to 6 to even 9 feet. That's extremely dangerous, life-threatening storm surge for you guys. That would be later this week, not tonight or tomorrow. That would be it'd be tomorrow and Thursday. And then 6 to 9 in some of those pockets near Hilton Head, 3 to 6 through parts of Georgia. And that is extremely dangerous, a lot of widespread flooding. And then as you get down into Florida, it's much less of an impact. If you've been watching my coverage, I've been talking about how I was concerned that the storm surge was going to be worse for the Carolinas and Georgia because just merely by the angle that Dorian comes into that. So here's Dorian, northeastern quadrant here, the worst winds here. And so as it goes up and near the states, those states, that wall of water is most intense on the northeastern quadrant of that hurricane. So that's why they're dealing with potentially the most dangerous storm surge. Okay, so here is local radar. I've got 5 live radars up: Melbourne, Tampa. I think I've got Orlando on there. Yep, I've got Miami, but you can't see it. And I've got Jacksonville radar up. But look at the again, another clear signature to me that this is just not a classic hurricane anymore is the structure of that eye. And what the if you can call it an asset, I guess, is to a hurricane that's this close to the United States. The ground-based radar does an excellent job of letting us see the structure of that eye. So see how it's shorter, in width than length. And as you go down here and look, there's some rigidity down here. There's some dry air training into this core. You can see some of it here. So we don't see that big circle, that real fine donut that we saw that was with that category 5. But look what we got here. We have got massive amount of wind and rain just right on the coast of Central Florida. They're getting hammered right now from Fort Pierce all the way up into Volusia County. Really, really dangerous winds just off the coast there. Let me zoom in and we'll kind of look here. So Fort Pierce, you got light to moderate rain, not too bad. You've had some squalls. Definitely Vero Beach getting done with some of the heavier downpours, but there was a tornado warning up in Brevard County at 6:30, and I do think there may have been a water spout. I haven't had time to go back, but we were live on Facebook when it popped up, and we looked at it in the velocity mode, and I saw some rotation there. So there may have been a quick spin up that tried to cross the river. A lot of times we get the warnings issued because we're already dealing with wind shear. We've got fast rotating bands coming on the outer side of the hurricane, rotating quickly on land, and that can create friction and sometimes short-lived tornadoes. Back through New Smyrna Beach there between Oak Hill, boy, you guys are getting some big time rain. And then in Flagler Beach, you're getting some too. Even as I pull out here, you can see all of that rain that's going to get really, really close to Florida tonight and tomorrow. So that's where the worst weather is over the next 12 hours or so. If you live in this area, definitely keep your app handy because I do think we'll see more warnings issued, severe weather warnings possibly, and definitely could see the possibility of some short-lived tornadoes. Someone asked me on Facebook, how far in could the tornadoes develop? Well, that's hard to pinpoint, but they'll come in on these feeder bands. So here's a computer model that starts tonight in about 3 minutes, 7 o'clock. So even though the computer model, look at that, it looks pretty accurate, right? Compared to the radar. This model, it's the 4-kilometer RPM, and it does a really decent job of forecasting weather. I use this one a lot. So as we head through tonight, we're going to see some really nasty weather again along the coastal parts of East Florida, and then we've got a band here that comes in just before 11 through parts of Flagler down into Volusia and even into northern Brevard County. Some really nasty weather for those folks. And then even into tomorrow, we're still going to be dealing with the impacts as we get into the day tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon, and then it shifts northward, of course, into Georgia. Most of the weather on the current path would keep the intense lines of storms off of Georgia's coast, but I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but at least the guidance shows that. And then as we head into Thursday, it starts to get to its closest point to the U.S., and I think that will be North Carolina will have the worst of the winds that Dorian has, and those could be Category 2 winds at that point. So we definitely are going to be seeing some really intense hurricane force winds, Category 2s, and maybe even gusting higher than that as we head into Thursday. So I know preps are going on there. Evacuation orders are also been issued of all of the weather hazards. Florida, for you guys, I think it will be the dirty weather that we call it on the west and south side of hurricanes, which is short-lived tornadoes. mainly inland and eastern Florida. The threat a little less for western Florida for those tornadoes, but flooding is a little less of a threat unless you happen to be one of those intense bands. Georgia, same for you. You'll also be having, for you, the biggest hazards will be these severe storms, perhaps a few isolated tornadoes. And I think for South Carolina and North Carolina in particular, probably going to get the worst wind that anyone will get from Dorian. Even though the core is going to expected to stay off the U.S. and never make landfall, you'll be close enough that you should be getting Category 2 winds. All right, 1 to 2 inches in Florida here in the next 24 hours or so. Then a big spike across the Carolinas and into Virginia, 6-7 inches of rain. And then possibly, if this tracks a little closer to the north, we could see maybe parts of Virginia impacted, maybe even Baltimore, Maryland, some big metro cities as we head into Thursday and Friday. Going to get not so much wind, maybe some gusty winds, but definitely going to get some rain. All right, yesterday I was pretty frustrated with the computer models, and I kind of threw them out the window, and I just did good old-fashioned meteorology and showed this water vapor, because this is not a computer model. This is not simulation. This is what's going on in the atmosphere live right now, and you can clearly see our trough that continues to dig down. This is an area of dry weather that's a mixture. This shows the water content in the atmosphere, but our trough continuing to dig down and turn Dorian north, and it's going to turn it more northeast as that trough gets even further entrenched and pick up in speed. So Dorian does not like differing pressure gradients from its own. So cyclones will turn very easily when there is a pressure system involved. So Dorian was initially being steered by a Bermuda high. You may remember us talking about that early in the forecast. That's what you see here. Well, that lost its grip, and that's why Dorian sat over the Bahamas. This high pressure ridge moved enough back towards the east, and we had this one over here in the Gulf that wasn't able to pick it up either, and the net effect was no steering currents. The trough digged down far enough. I saw it yesterday. I felt very confident in the turn, and indeed it finally has turned, and as that trough continues to dig down, it's going to lift and pick up acceleration and should get Dorian out of here sooner than later, but we still have some time here. So here's the GFS. This is a wind model for tomorrow, starting around 6:40 in the morning. So Orlando winds around 40 miles an hour for you, 26 for Tampa, 43 Melbourne, Daytona Beach around 60 miles an hour, and Jacksonville around 36. So these winds are certainly manageable. Severe thunderstorm winds are 58 miles an hour or greater. So I'm not anticipating, there's going to be some widespread damage event. I think we'll have less impacts from Dorian, the state of Florida will, than we got from Matthew. We got some really bad weather. I'm not saying this is not a serious weather event. It is. But I think in terms, if you're looking back in short-term memory and trying to quantify the impact, based on our guidance today, I think there will be some short power fluctuations. We could see some power outages in the state of Florida. I think it's going to be a bigger threat, of course, for the Georgia and Carolinas. And then as we move up in this area, we're talking 66 mile per hour winds. This is guidance again. Thursday morning for Savannah, about 54 for Charleston, and about 24 for Wilmington. And that, of course, will pick up as you get into Friday and it gets a little closer to you. There's been a lot of storm reports as well across the state of Florida. The entire eastern seaboard of Florida pretty much has had some kind of severe weather reported from Dorian. Most of it has been in wind gusts. There's been some damage, some minor damage, but you can see here there's a lot of wind reports. Those are the ones that are in that maroon color. And then we also have some flooding damage. Those are those other discs. And as I mentioned, there's also been a little bit of some of the severe weather that's tried to move through with some severe weather warnings. But so far, we haven't seen reports of anything like that tornado. We'll see if anything happened in Brevard County. The warning dropped pretty quickly, so and it was over the river, so I don't think it turned out to be anything. It may have been a water spout, but we'll find out. Here's the wind radii. So this is tonight, and again, extreme eastern Florida dealing with tropical storm force winds. The bulk of those stay off the coast. What you see here in orange is the winds that are anywhere from around 34 miles an hour up to about 73. Here is hurricane force winds, but this does not extrapolate the eye wall, or the northeastern eye. So don't expect to see that big radius there is tropical storm force or hurricane force winds. The eye itself is going to be generally in this area, and those are where the winds are going to be isolated to around 110 miles an hour. So it looks like Florida does not get anywhere near the center of circulation. Savannah, Georgia, into the Carolinas, definitely closer. And look at that as we head into Thursday. Charleston, you get a piece of some hurricane force winds. So does North Carolina. So the states in general, it looks like it's going to be those two that are going to have the biggest threat for hurricane force winds. All right. So historical tracking here, that is. A lot of folks were asking, hey, what does this look like? What does this remind you of? So it reminded me since I've lived and I'm a native, Florida native, it reminded me of Matthew and Floyd. And as I looked up the historical data on these two hurricanes, and you can see that the Matthew scenario, which is the pink one, the lighter pink one, the lilac color, was a closer alignment to what we got with that we're seeing right now with Dorian. Dorian a little bit further east than Matthew was, and then Floyd very similar. The only stark difference between Matthew and Floyd is Floyd was huge. It was 400 miles across in diameter. It was a massive hurricane. This is a much smaller hurricane. It's elongated. It's a longer hurricane, but in terms of the wind in direct impacts, Matthew had a bigger impact at this point. We'll see how this all verifies. I don't like to compare hurricanes all that much because, again, there's always differences in a landfalling hurricane and how they impact certain areas. Okay, I think that'll do it. Our computer stayed up and running. It crashed on Facebook, so I'm glad we got this one out. We'll have another update here for you guys in a couple hours. I appreciate you guys continuing to stick around with the coverage for us, with us, and we'll continue to have our ongoing coverage of Hurricane Dorian as it gets so close to Florida and the southeastern U.S. in these coming days. For now, let me leave you with a look at our social media pages. Again, if you're not on Facebook or Twitter and you'd like to get some more updates, we also have some there. We've got some really fascinating photos that we've been posting from the Bahamas that you may have not seen. So check us out there. Facebook is /MyRadar. Twitter is @MyRadarWex. Instagram is @MyRadar. And of course, you can find us here on YouTube. Okay, you guys, that'll do it for now. I'll answer this question real quick. A lot of people have been asking about the iPhone. The iPhone giveaway is when we reach 100 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So keep telling your friends about us. Keep telling them that we've got a YouTube channel. Once we reach 100,000, we're about 30,000, I think, and change. So we got a ways to go, but we will definitely be giving away that iPhone. Okay. I hope that answers that question. I see it a lot. That'll do it for now, you guys. Have a great night.
Continuing hurricane coverage on My Radar.